Welcome everybody. I'm Sarah Lentini, President and CEO of the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce. It is my great pleasure to welcome everybody to meet the candidates for Monroe County Court Judge, Derrick Harnsberger and Meredith Vacca. Welcome to the program. I'm going to be introducing both of them more specifically in a moment and have them tell you a little bit about themselves. But I do want to make sure that I start by making the audience aware that the Chamber is nonpartisan, that the Chamber is not endorsing a candidate, and that this is not a debate. That is not the format of this program. We're really asking each candidate to speak a little bit, give us a little background, and in a sense of the job of Monroe County Court Judge, and then to ask questions and be able to have a more refined understanding of both the role of Monroe County Court Judge as well as their backgrounds and the experiences they're bringing to that role. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our first candidate for Monroe County Court Judge, Derrick Harnsberger.
Perfect.
Welcome, Derrick.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank the Commerce crew for putting this together. With everything that's happening with COVID-19 right now, it is a rare occasion where we're able to have Meredith and myself in the same place at the same time. So this is absolutely an amazing opportunity. Thank you guys for putting this together. So a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate from the Syracuse University College of Law. When I graduated law school, I wanted to give back to my community. I wanted to make the biggest impact I could. So I immediately joined the Public Defender's Office here in Monroe County with Tim Donaher. Over my career as a public defender, I represented and changed the lives of thousands of people. Afterwards, working with the public defenders, I wanted to take my career in a different direction. So I worked in the post-conviction spectrum. So I was working with individuals who were convicted of crimes, looking to turn their lives around, and I, as their attorney, were helping to get that and make that happen. And in doing so, part of my job was helping them, but also preserving their civil liberties and rights. Because oftentimes parolees are one of the individuals who tend to be most scrutinized, and we want to make sure that if a person is being sent to prison, we want to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. Ever since working in that capacity, I've worked with Sandra Dorley in the District Attorney's Office. Up until recently, I worked in special investigations where I prosecuted firearm, narcotic, and gang crime, which, as you might imagine, is something that is a serious concern here in Monroe County. And as of recently, since starting this campaign, I've worked in the Appeals Bureau, where I work defending convictions, making sure that due process was followed in every conviction. I live in the town of Riga with my wife. God hasn't blessed us with children yet, but we have various dogs and cats that keep us company. And in addition to my time as a lawyer, last November, I was elected to the town council here in Riga, where I've been on the front lines dealing with the COVID-19 crisis and everything going on that front. So without further ado, I defer to Meredith.
Thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce the other candidate for Monroe County Court Judge, Meredith Vacca.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for arranging this. I really appreciate it and appreciate it for seeing really inform all of the voters here. And thank you for the people present here today. So let me just tell you a little bit about my personal background. I was born in South Korea. My twin sister and I were both adopted when we were about 5 months old. So I have grown up in the Rochester area. I actually grew up in the town of Greece in a big Italian-American family. And I currently live in the city of Rochester with my husband who grew up in Webster. And we have a little daughter, Genevieve, who is going to be turning 3 the day before Election Day. I've been an attorney now for almost 15 years, and I started out doing civil practice in Buffalo and then here in Rochester. And then I came over to the district attorney's office. I've been an assistant district attorney now for 13 years. And there I've handled thousands of cases. I'm a trial attorney. I've done many trials and hearings. I started out, in our town courts, moved up through the ranks, and did felony DWI bureau, did domestic violence, and really for the past decade, I've specialized in the prosecution of child physical and sexual abuse cases. And that is the bureau that I chose to be in. I can tell you that we really handle some of the most challenging cases in the Child Abuse Bureau. I find them very rewarding. And I also specialize in homicides, primarily involving domestic violence and child fatalities. So I really see my job as, helping give a voice to victims and children, really some of the most vulnerable members of our population, and help, bring them justice within our criminal justice system.
Terrific. Well, you both have great backgrounds. It's nice to hear that you're both so entrenched in our local community, and obviously you both handle thousands of cases, and you're both public servants. At least I think you're both public servants, correct?
Yes.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about the Monroe County Court Judge. How many Monroe County Court judges are there? What sorts of cases do Monroe County Court judges hear? I realize you might be covering some of the same ground, but I'd love to hear you both describe the role, if you would. And Derrick, why don't we have you begin?
Sure. There are 6 current county court judges. The spot that Meredith and I are running for is currently held by Judge Dinolfo. Judge Dinolfo, who is the husband of former Executive Cheryl Dinolfo, is running for Supreme Court this year, so that's leaving a vacancy for the 2 of us to jump in. In terms of what the county court is, for those who are uninitiated with the criminal justice system, the county court is the next level up from what you would think of as your local courts. So your Greecetown court, your Rochester City court, that deals with misdemeanors, traffic issues. So we are dealing with an elevated court, a superior court that deals with pretty much the serious crimes that go on in Monroe County. So if you are indicted on a felony level charge, odds are it is going to be a county court judge that's going to oversee that. In addition to that, the county court judges are also directly responsible for handling appeals that come from the local court level. So if you are, for whatever reason, convicted in a town or city court and you think that something went wrong, it's actually the county court judges who are responsible for intellectually identifying whether there was an issue, and if there was an issue, whether or not it was something that necessitates relief. County court judges have an amazing amount of power and responsibility, and that's why it's very important that voters put the right person in. These are 10-year terms. So a judge can do a lot of good or a lot of bad in 10 years. And particularly in light of things like bail reform, discovery reform, it's important that we have judges who can balance the equities between the defendants and their civil rights, as well as victims, witnesses, and individuals in the community, to ensure that we have due process for everybody involved. I'm sure Meredith can supplement with some other observations.
Absolutely. Meredith, I know we got a lot of the basics from Derrick, but describe for us the role as you see it, and maybe some aspects that haven't been surfaced yet.
Sure. So just to add to what Derrick was saying, the county court is a trial level court. And so really briefly, in our New York State court system, we have trial level courts, we have the appellate division, and then we have our highest court, the New York State Court of Appeals, located in Albany. So as a county court judge, we would be administering jury trials and bench trials. County court judges make decisions, on a daily basis about sentencing and suppression issues, decisions on motion arguments, arraignments, and all different things like that. We also have 2 of our county court judges right now, which do the Judicial Diversion Program, which is by statute. It's a program where generally non-violent felonies go. And so we have county court judges doing kind of treatment programs and things like that. Judges do have a lot of discretion in sentencing and things like that. And I'll just give an example. Let's say a B felony comes before a county court judge. The judge is constrained in certain ways. If someone's convicted of a B violent felony, that defendant would have to be sentenced to state prison. But the range in that kind of case is 5 years to 25 years. So it's just an example to demonstrate the kind of discretion a county court judge has on a daily basis.
Terrific. I suspect that there might be more questions about the role, but maybe we could leave them for the Q&A, because I'd like to have you both speak a little bit about your experience as it relates to the role. And maybe embedded in that is sort of what made you want to take on the role? What is it about your the point that you're at in your career and in your vision, both for yourself and for the basic legal profession that you're in, that has attracted you to the role and makes you feel like it's a good fit for you? And this time, to be fair, I'm going to switch the order a little bit and ask if you, Meredith, could please go first.
Sure. So I have been practicing in our superior courts, county court, and our New York State Supreme Court now for over a decade. You know, as I said earlier, I've been an attorney for 15 years. And, you know, I've really had a lot of experience, particularly in the courtroom, in front of our county court judges and our Supreme Court judges. And, you know, I feel ready to kind of take that next step and be in that position where I'm making these important decisions. You know, as I mentioned before, I've prosecuted child abuse cases really for a decade. And so what it's done is it's given me this opportunity to talk to people and listen to their stories. And that's really something that I would like to bring to the county court bench. And what I mean by that is, you know, the knowledge and experience I have of understanding things like trauma. You know, I talk to kids about really some of the most difficult things that have ever happened to them. I talk to them about struggles observing domestic violence in their home. I talk to their parents about their struggles with mental illness and addiction. And, you know, I want to bring all of that to the county court bench to really make informed and thoughtful decisions about people's lives.
Terrific, thank you. Derrick, how about you?
The reason I'm running is because I had the diverse experience that I think Monroe County needs and deserves right now. My experience is something that is atypical. It is not something that you see in any judge on the bench right now. I started out as a public defender representing thousands, where my colleague was talking to families who have issues with mental health and addiction. I'm the one in the trenches who was talking to them, working with them, addressing them. And that was something that is very personal to me, so that when I go into the court system as a judge, I can recognize the true nature of addiction, the true nature of the issues that individuals like that face. But also coming in as a prosecutor, it provides me with the ability to be truly balanced. When we think of the scales of justice, if all your experience is on one side of the scale, you really can't be fair and balanced, in my opinion. I think that judges in Monroe County in particular right now, given everything that we've faced as a society, we deserve to have judges who have personal experience on both sides of the aisle. And candidly, I'm the only candidate that has that experience, and I hope the voters see that as well.
So I want to open it up for questions, but I want to have you both speak to this particular point, a couple of points actually. One is, you know, there's some, unfortunately, there have been some pretty high visibility cases in our own community, you know, in the last few months, several months. And I may not even be aware of all of them because I, you know, tend to kind of focus on the chamber and business issues. But even I am aware of at least a couple very high-profile cases. One of them, of course, is the case of Daniel Prude. The other is, of course, what's happening with the mayor of the city of Rochester, who was recently arraigned. And I wondered if you could tell us, first of all, whether those cases are likely to be heard ultimately by a Monroe County court judge, and you know, and whether there are cases. I mean, it sounds like the majority of the major cases of our community would come before a Monroe County court judge. So, you know, sort of on the tail end of that, goodness, what is it that you wouldn't be hearing? But I wondered if you could tell us if that indeed is going to end up likely to be front and center in the Monroe County court judge role. And I think you're both muted. I don't know, Meredith, maybe I could start with you again since you just unmuted.
Sure. So the case involving the mayor is appearing in front of a county court judge. It's actually a county court judge from outside of Monroe County. And regarding the Daniel Prude situation, I would just say that if it was indicted as a felony, yes, it could appear in front of a Monroe County Court judge. I would just also add that our state Supreme Court judges also handle felonies that occur in Monroe County as well. So it could appear in front of a state Supreme Court judge. And if I could, Sarah, I just wanted to briefly respond to what Derrick had said before about kind of balance. You know, I would just say I respectfully disagree with him. I absolutely believe that a prosecutor can become a judge and be very fair. And that being said, a public defender or a defense attorney can come in to the county court bench and be fair. You know, I can say this, you know, my job as an assistant district attorney is to really be fair. We represent the people of the state of New York. So what I do on a daily basis is I make decisions about fairness. And, you know, I make decisions about whether I should move forward with charges on a case, what kind of sentence to offer, what kind of reduction to offer. Maybe I should dismiss a case. You know, I think sometimes the public sees our job as just putting people in jail and convicting, and that's not my job at all. My job is really to be fair. So I've been making decisions about fairness my entire career. You know, I'd also add that my father is a criminal defense attorney. So I grew up with hearing his stories about him advocating for his clients. And so I come here with a very deep respect for both sides. I view both sides as equally as important. And I would definitely bring that balance to the county court bench.
Thank you, Meredith. Derrick, I know some of what Meredith just went over in terms of the role of the Monroe County Court judge and the likelihood for the two cases I cited, you know, to come in front of a Monroe County Court judge. I'm assuming that your answer wouldn't be different than Meredith's, but I wondered if you could talk about how, you know, it sounds like the Monroe County Court judge handles an awful lot. What sorts of cases are not brought in front of the Monroe County Court judge?
Yeah, to amplify what Meredith said, with particularly with Daniel Prude, that is an unindicted case that is still pending grand jury action from the Attorney General's office. So by the rules of ethics, Meredith and I can't comment about it. The main reason being, if there is an indictment, as Meredith said, it could conceivably come before one of us. So in fairness to him, in fairness to all the people who are involved, we have to maintain the utmost propriety to make sure that he, the community, everybody lands in front of a judge, because as we're seeing, there's a lot of scrutiny over this process. So what we want to do is both of us, and I won't want to speak for Meredith, but I think I can fairly say that we both want to make sure that the criminal justice system works and has the public trust. So if that case was to land in front of us as judges, we want to make sure that the public is confident that they have a judge who is fair and impartial to overlook it. You know, one of the most frustrating things I have as a candidate is not really being able to talk about institutional racism and systemic racism issues like I think we should. The rules of ethics are very tight, and one of the things that we're not allowed to do is make comments that would instill a particular emotional response to make a person want to vote for someone or not want to vote for something. But at the same time, it's making it difficult for us to really address the roots of these problems, which is why I urge that we got to have that balance on the bench from a personal level, because institutional racism is not something that you can truly understand unless you've gone through it yourself, or you have the experience where you have gone through it vicariously through someone close to you. And that's where my experience comes in, to be able to have that experience. In terms of the county court spectrum and what we take, we either have the Supreme Courts or the county courts deal with the felonies. Now, in terms of for things like commerce, for example, large-scale theft, white-collar crime, those are crimes that would ultimately appear in front of a county court judge. So county court judges have a large impact on public safety, as well as the interests of business in how we litigate and how we move these kind of cases forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much, both of you. I'm learning, hopefully other people are learning. I think, unfortunately, that we don't typically pay as much attention to, you know, elections that have to do with judges. The very big one that's on the national stage, perhaps being an exception. And judges do have an awful lot of power, and it's our pleasure to be able to put a spotlight on this. In case you're just joining us, I'm Sarah Lentini, President and CEO of the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce, and this is Meet the Candidates, for Monroe County Court Judge. And if you're joining us late, I want to make sure that everybody knows that we do have members of the press present, and we are recording. And right now, I'd like to open it up for questions. So feel free to either unmute yourselves or to put something in the chat box, and I can read it for you, especially if you direct it just to me. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question if nobody else has one. Corey, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to thank both candidates for appearing today and for talking to us, and I greatly appreciate it, and thank you both.
Thank you, Corey. You know, one of the things that that has sort of struck me is that maybe this is me editorializing a little bit, folks, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm wondering if perhaps we need to revamp the debate format that we rely on so heavily, at least in the in the media, in the national media. I have a strong preference for conversations such as this one that are a little bit a little bit less antagonistic and more about just learning about the candidates, learning about the role, learning how they fit. So I appreciate that you're both here, and also very much appreciate that. You're both very respectful of each other, as I thought you would be. So, as I think about a Monroe County Court judge, this is my ignorance about judges in general. I think I'm still not terribly clear just how much latitude the judge has in the judicial process, and whether there are any cases that come before you where there isn't a jury. Is there always a jury with a Monroe County Court judge?
It's getting smaller and smaller. The reality of the situation is Albany and the legislature of the state has significantly cut back on the ability of judges to take action. You look at bail reform, you look at discovery reform, and reasonable minds can differ as to the impacts of these, but the reality is that as a county court judge, there are certain crimes that we physically cannot hold a person with bail. We are obligated by law to release them. It's the same thing that police officers deal with in the field, that there are now crimes that they cannot arrest or detain a person. They must give an appearance ticket and tell them not to come back. And this has been a source of contention and frustration, particularly with things like rioting in the city that we dealt with, where we're dealing with situations where law enforcement is trying to curtail violence, but it is effectively a process where once you have the person in custody, they're immediately released to an appearance ticket a month and a half later. And hopefully, as we're seeing in the media, that paperwork is processed appropriately so the return date doesn't result in you being arrested because you didn't appear on a date that you didn't have to be in. But as far as what we do have power to do, for example, murder is a crime where we can hold a person on bail. This is a decision that's a case-by-case basis, but depending on who you have as a judge will dictate how that works. We saw in the news coverage that one of the judges that was elected in November made the decision to be releasing murderers. Now it's a case-by-case basis, but reasonable minds will differ. So it's incredibly important that voters put the right person in place, because if you don't, you might not get the right result. The other thing that judges have extreme discretion in is discovery. In the campaign trail recently, I had a conversation with an individual who admitted to me he was in the city a few weeks ago and he was robbed at gunpoint. He went out to buy some marijuana from a dealer on a corner. He got robbed at gunpoint, and I asked him, "Did you call the police?" And he responded, "No." When I asked him why, his response was, "Well, I don't want him to get the home address, phone number, and contact information for me and my family. It's not worth it to me to put my family at risk for a person who just pulled a gun on me." And this is a conflict that I think a lot of people have with the laws. Judges do have discretion and the power to limit the amount of information that goes to a defense attorney. They have the ability to limit the amount that goes to a defendant. But that is a matter of discretion that each individual judge has. So it is important that for looking at that bigger picture, we have judges who are readily willing and capable to balance those equities, because defendants have due process rights as well to identify witnesses. So in that case, it's important to make sure that we balance it. And I think that that's where my experience from both sides comes into play.
Meredith, do you want to speak to the role of the judge, the discretion of the Monroe County Court judge, and sort of its evolution? I don't know if you share the perspective that was just espoused.
Yes, and quickly, Sarah, just to answer the other part of your question, trials in county court are primarily jury trials. The defendant has a right to a jury trial under our Constitution, but trials can also be bench trials if the defendant chooses to have the judge make the decision and become the fact finder. So just briefly, I wanted to answer that. So yes, judges absolutely have a lot of significant discretion, specifically county court judges as our trial level judges. Number one, our obligation is to follow the law. And so we're constrained in that. We're constrained by the statutes that govern our criminal procedure and our criminal penal law. But we're also given a lot of discretion. As I mentioned earlier, we have discretion in sentencing. We have discretion in, making decisions that come before us. Let's say at a hearing regarding maybe voluntariness of a statement, a motion to suppress certain evidence, things like that. And then when we administer trials, we have discretion to make, all the decisions regarding the law, any evidentiary objections, things like that. So judges have a lot of discretion, and, it's important for them to have that experience to make those decisions, whether it's, a decision that requires legal research or whether it's a decision they have to make on the spot during a jury trial.
Thank you very much, both of you. We have a question that's actually a good segue from Bennett Loudon, and that is, could you each talk about Judge DeFiore's proposal to reform and streamline the courts across the state? Meredith, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can take that. So basically the proposal is to streamline our New York State court system, and we would have state Supreme Court judges. There wouldn't be county court judges, and the state Supreme Court system would be divided into, criminal and civil, and then kind of matrimonial family court. And the objective of the proposal is to really make the system more simplistic and more accessible to to our community, to people that have to go into the court system. The hope is that people can go to a court and not have to appear in front of numerous different judges. So we can say as judicial candidates what we think about it, the administration of justice. So I think this is something that we can comment on. I would say that anything that simplifies a system and makes it more accessible for the members of our community, especially people that come to our courts that maybe have difficulty with transportation or have jobs that it's hard to get out of for their court appearances. Those kinds of things are definitely good for all of us, and to ensure that justice is served.
Thank you very much, Meredith. Derrick, how about you? What is your perspective on the proposal for reform?
It's 100% support. If reforms are needed to make the streamlined system work better, absolutely behind it. There is nothing wrong with reform. I know in society right now there's a lot of talk about reforms. There's nothing wrong with reforms. I think we can all agree that if a system, a business, whatever it is not working, reform is good. But the critical thing that we have to do is make sure that we do it right. New York State has a very bad habit of trying to impact change and figure out how to do it later. We saw that when it implemented DWI laws, where it required ignition interlock systems for every DWI conviction, and then you end up in a situation where they put it on the counties to figure it out. And it spent a year and a half before we were able to get a system together. Same thing with discovery and bail reform. It just gets sprung and says, oh, by the way, January 1st, here you go, comply. So the reform ideas are great in theory, but the thing that I worry is that we cannot rush these sort of reforms. These are grand, large-scale reforms, and we really need to have diverse thought on the bench in order to really take these out to their logical ends. You know, for one concern I have is I want to make sure that we have a diverse group of individuals on the bench to be able to have an array of issues brought before an array of judges who have experience from a different array. I mean, if you look at Meredith and myself, we are both career criminal litigators. What qualifies us to be in a better position for complex civil litigation? We saw recently that Judge Ark, who specializes in complex asbestos and civil litigation, complex election law cases, we lose him on the bench, but yet the ones who typically run for these positions are individuals of public litigation, like public defenders, prosecutors. So I don't want to lose the diversity of the bench and the diversity of thought, you know, and have a situation where we're improving accessibility, but it's at the expense of efficiency as well as the ability for the courts to actually administer justice fair, because that's really ultimately cutting against everything we're trying to achieve.
Thank you both. I want to just take a moment to introduce two members of the Board of Directors of the Chamber. One is Jean Welch from Tully Rinke, the LLC. Jean is, of course, from your part of the world, right? In fact, you may both have be familiar with him and his firm. And Jean is also an officer of the board of the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce on the executive committee, and also serves on a separate but related organization, the Greece Chamber Charitable Foundation, on that board of directors. So thank you and welcome, Jean. And then I want to also introduce Corey Listar. I think he asked you a question a little bit earlier. Corey is the owner, along with his business partner, Matt. Goodness, I'm just having one of those brain freezes. You'll help me, Corey.
Of
Yeti to Work,
Yeah.
which is a Rochester's, I'm giving your tagline, Rochester's talent acquisition specialist, and is a great partner of ours, a great member of ours, in addition to serving on the board. So welcome, both of you gentlemen. And I wanted to share some questions. Jean was actually kind enough to put up some great questions for both of you. Did you both grow up in Monroe County? And then if you could talk about the colleges and law schools that you attended. And then there are actually a couple of other questions, but why don't we start with those? Derrick, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I attended Roger Williams University, which is a school in Rhode Island. I was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is why I'm a diehard Green Bay Packer fan. I was raised in Connecticut to my father, who was a electrical and engineer for a power plant company. My mother is a K-6 education teacher. Both are retired now and living in Rhode Island. I am an ocean person. In my spare time, I am a surfer. So the state of Rhode Island had great appeal to have a university right by the ocean that I could hop on my board in my spare time. So after that, I went to the Syracuse University College of Law. And while I was there, I interned with the U.S. Attorney's Office working in the Exile program. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Exile program is a program that was enacted by the federal government to tackle gun crime. That was really a major problem through the late 90s, 2000s. The basic idea was certain crimes in states were not efficient in combating gun crime. The perspective is that state laws were too lax on gun crime, so that the federal court system should step up. So the idea was the federal system would step up on the worst of the worst offenders, and that's what this program was for. So my job was to evaluate whether these cases were appropriate for federal prosecution that came through the Syracuse area while I was in law school there. And the reason I'm in Monroe County is actually at the Assistant United States Attorney recommendation. As I said, I really want to be a public servant. I want to be a judge someday. What is the best way that I can do that? And he said, I want you to go out, find the job that gives you the greatest amount of litigation experience possible, hunt it down, and don't be afraid to litigate every case. And I said, where can I go? And he said, unambiguously, head over to Monroe County. They are the greatest office, whether it's a DA, as a PD. They have you will handle more cases in 1 year than we will at any other office. When I joined the office, I litigated 1,400 cases in a year, the vast majority of which was all at one time. as opposed to other offices that handle only minuscule amounts.
Okay.
And I know Meredith went through the same rite of initiation as a DA. But the reality is I moved out here and I loved it, and I have no intention of leaving. And that's why I ran for town board, because I love Monroe County and I want to keep Monroe County the greatest county in New York State.
Thank you, Derrick. Meredith, how about you?
Yes, I am a proud, lifelong Monroe County resident. As I mentioned in the beginning of our program today, I was born in South Korea, but I have lived in Rochester my entire life, being adopted into a family that lived in Greece. So I grew up in the town of Greece. For those people that are familiar with Greece, I grew up in 14612. And I would say all of my family still lives in 14612. So I grew up in Greece. I went to Mother of Sorrows school, and then I went to Nazareth Hall in the city. Then I went to Nazareth Academy, which is an all-girls high school that is sadly closed. It's been closed for a while now. It kind of merged into Aquinas. Then after that, I went to Colgate University in Hamilton. So that's about 2.5 hours away from here. Then after Hamilton, I went to University of Buffalo Law School. And so I always knew that I wanted to settle in Rochester, and primarily because this is where my family is. So, you know, I stayed in Buffalo for a year, doing private practice, and I was able to transfer to the Rochester office, where I worked there for another year and then went to the district attorney's office, and I've been there since. And then my husband and I got a house in the Park Avenue neighborhood, so that's where we live today. We love old houses, and our daughter is here, and she just started preschool in September, so she attends a Catholic school around here.
Terrific. Thank you both for sharing, not just answering the questions, but sharing a little bit about yourselves as well, and your evolution. We have some other questions that come from Jean, and this one's I think a really great question, and that is, what is the highest profile case in the news that you have prosecuted or been involved with? I'm sorry, whoever wants to go first. Meredith, you unmuted, so go right ahead.
Sure. So I've been involved with a lot of high-profile cases. One of the most significant cases that I was involved in, actually, I was asked by our district attorney, Sandra Dorley, to second chair with her. So the two of us prosecuted Clayton Whittemore. It was the SUNY Brockport homicide. It was a case involving domestic violence where a freshman student there was killed by her boyfriend. And I'm sure a lot of you recall that. It was several years ago. That case did go to trial before Supreme Court Judge Doyle. And after a lengthy trial, he was found guilty of murder in the second degree and was sentenced to 25 years to life. Sandra and I actually had the opportunity to be on kind of national TV to talk about the case. So that was one high profile case. You know, I would say this, you know, most of the trials that I've done a lot of felony trials. Most of them have been violent felonies. I do a lot of cases involving children who have been sexually abused by, let's say, a parent or a relative, or, you know, the friend of a family. And, you know, sometimes those get media attention, sometimes they don't. But I definitely take every case very seriously, whether it's something highlighted by our news or not.
Thank you very much. Derrick, how about you?
So the most recent high-profile case that I was in was the case involving Seisman Brown and Amani Williams. Those are a very complicated case that got some considerable news here locally. The particulars of this case involved 3 different actions, 2 murders and an attempted murder between these 2 individuals. The first one involved the victim being stabbed over 100 times. The second involved a person being shot and then their body burned. And the third is an attempted murder where they attempted to rob a person and shot him, missing vital organs only by millimeters. The particulars of that case were so complicated that we had an unprecedented jury system that hadn't been deployed in decades, where we had 2 full juries, we had 65 witnesses, full voir dires for everybody, 2 different jury deliberations. It took almost 6 months in order to go through the entire process. And you know, part of the reason I actually had this question come up is they said, a person asked me, why don't I see you more talking about your cases? And I said, I respectfully do not believe that pretrial appearances is something that I should be doing. I intentionally shy away from the media prior to trial because I believe that defendants, and this goes back to my experience as a defense attorney, I believe they should be given every opportunity to defend themselves. And I just don't think it's personally one of those things that I think prosecutors on the whole tend to be a little bit too apt to go out in front of the media, particularly if you're thinking on running for political office to try and get free airtime. I just don't abide by that. So that's why if you look up my name and try and find me making pretrial comments, you're really not going to see a lot, but you're going to see a lot of coverage for stuff that happens after the fact. And that's why as an appellate attorney, I work on, like the case that Meredith was talking about, when that person appeals and goes to the appellate court, my bureau is the one responsible for arguing any issues that may have allegedly come up during that trial. So we don't get the sexy media coverage that you get at the trial level, but our work is what makes sure that the convictions that are obtained at the trial level stay that way, and to make sure that only the guilty are actually convicted.
Thank you very much, both of you. There's another question that I want to get to that was sent to me in the chat box, but I just wanted to go back to something that I heard earlier, and that is that you conceivably have 1,400 cases at a time, both of you. You conceivably have numbers that are that big.
Yeah. So to start out, and it's gotten better. But when I started out in the Monroe County Public Defender's Office, when I started my job, they said, congratulations, here's your job. You have very limited experience coming out of law school. Here's your caseload. I adopted a caseload of 650 people. So 650 cases at one time. When I was in my last term in the Rochester City Court, I was doing a city court term with Judge Crimmy, who is a judge there. Phenomenal judge. We ended up with the way that it works is this prosecutor and defense attorney will take in all cases arraigned in the city of Rochester for a 1-month period of time. So in that rotation, I handled 1,400 misdemeanor cases alone, all at one time. And it's the same thing goes for the prosecutor on the other side. And in actuality, it's worse for prosecutors because that was only me as a public defender. When I became a DA, not only did I have to fight the public defender
losing you a little
cases, but the ones that also went out to private counsel. So it ends up that it's gotten better. There's been reforms that have put caseload caps for the public defender's office so that public defenders now are only allowed to litigate a certain amount of cases. However, the legislature has completely ignored the district attorney's offices. So while the public defender's offices right now are limiting the amount of their cases, nothing has changed for us. So if you were to ask one of the local court attorneys right now how many cases, you are going to find it is from the hundreds into the thousands that they are responsible for at one time. So it's a great question that I think we really need to have a bigger conversation about whether or not we're funding the district attorney's office in the right way to make sure every case gets the justice it deserves.
Meredith, could you speak to that a little bit? Are you also handling, I mean, is everybody just handling that seems staggering to me, the numbers. It doesn't really even matter if you're saying 600 or 1,400, they both sound incredibly high to me.
Yes, I would say this, all of our assistant district attorneys and public defenders have a high caseload. We're not working with those kinds of numbers right now as a felony DA. So, those kinds of numbers in the thousands really would be when you're dealing with misdemeanors and violations. So you have a high caseload there where the cases are, less complex. So now, that I've been doing this for a long time, my caseload is less. It's not in the thousands. I would say it's going to be probably around 50 or 60 cases, but each case I have is a lot more complex, really requires me to have multiple meetings, in my case, with children and their families. I often deal with very complex medical issues where, let's say, an infant or a young child is seriously physically injured. So, whether you're in town court or city court or doing felonies, we definitely are very busy. We have a large caseload and a lot of work to do, but the numbers are different depending on the bureau, the amount of time you've been at the office, and the kind of complexity of the cases that you're handling.
Well, the two of you have certainly opened my eyes, and you've underscored that you certainly have, both of you, a tremendous amount of experience as a result of the jobs that you have in the public sector. It is sort of making me wonder if there's a role for the public in helping to support the court system and the judges' roles. In fact, I thought that I had heard from one of you before we even scheduled this that part of the reason that some of the cases that might come in front of a Monroe County Court judge end up possibly being reviewed or presided over by a state judge is just because there are so many cases. Did I get that right?
Yes. So in a lot of other counties, the county court judges handle the criminal cases, the felony level cases. Here, because of the amount, our county court judges handle felonies as well as our state Supreme Court judges. Our state Supreme Court judges handle criminal and civil cases.
Okay, so we have a lot of cases, and we're certainly a great place to learn, and presumably we have great offices of attorneys, but I'm a little dismayed by how many cases we do have, and also certainly wonder if we maybe need a few more judges, a few more Monroe County Court judges, but maybe that's a commentary for another day, unless either one of you wants to pick that up. I had another question in the chat box, and it's not mine, so I might need even a little bit of assistance in clarifying it. This is going back to the Daniel Prude case. If the Prude officers get indicted, could either of you preside over that trial if you had used one of those officers, if they'd used one of those officers as one of their witnesses in a prosecution? Okay, I think I do understand the question. Would there be any issue for either one of you? Good question.
No.
Derrick, go right ahead or Meredith, that's fine, go right.
So, hypothetically, yes, the case could come in front of a county court judge. And, if I'm fortunate enough to win, then it could potentially come in front of me. I can't comment on how I would handle a certain case if there was, a potential conflict. So I can just talk generally. As a judge, it's important for us to take each case as it comes before us and determine whether there is any conflict, to make sure that the parties are informed of that, and to recuse myself if that's important. I can tell you this, if I am elected, then for about 6 months to a year, I would not be handling any criminal cases in Monroe County. There'd be a transition period where I would be handling, family court or maybe criminal cases in another county, since I've been working at the DA's office for a long period of time.
Understood. So there's actually a plan for it in the system, a plan to create a little bit of a separation, a little breathing room.
Yes, it's important to have that transition.
I didn't know that. It's very interesting. Derrick, how about you? Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I wanted to go to appeals, was to try and minimize that amount of time. In appeals, I'm not working with law enforcement. I'm not on the ground level. I'm not doing trials, investigations. I'm working in a completely different sphere of the office. So while that is a decision that still needs to be determined whether or not I can streamline a little bit more, It's something that I've intentionally done to try and recognize the problems that we have right now. Because as we saw, we're losing 2 judges already in the Supreme Court. So it's not getting better. And then with all the trials that are backed up because of the courtroom closing down with COVID, I anticipate we need to really hit the ground running and have judges who are ready to hit the ground running, because we got to catch up. And, you know, with Prude, the Prude case in general, it's like I mentioned before, it's something that we can't specifically talk about. But in terms of the more general phrase with regards to, well, what about a situation where you have an investigator or a police officer or even a witness or victim who you've worked with before? Can you hear that case? And one of the big things that voters need to make a decision on is which candidate has the best ability to separate and compartmentalize themselves from their cases. You know, for myself, I have no qualms making it very clear that I have cross-examined the same officers that I send in front to testify now. So I have a balanced perspective, and that's where I think it's more incumbent on Meredith's side, where you have to be able to ensure that you are not going to be prospectively biased, particularly when it comes to a victim case, particularly when it comes to a child victim case, because a defendant who comes before a court has the right to feel comfortable that they're being treated fairly. So you got to think of, as an individual who is picking a judge who could potentially hear the Prude case, which judge do you think is going to be able to most fairly and impartially hear that case? And you should vote accordingly, not based on party, not based on, you know, outside beliefs of what you think. It's literally, if that's your issue, you should vote on the candidate who's best.
Okay, well, I want to say thank you both very much. Meredith Vacca and Derrick Harnsberger, both candidates for Monroe County Court Judge. I think you've done a great job, certainly from my perspective, a great job of sharing a bit about yourselves and your experience, and certainly sharing quite a bit about the role of Monroe County Court Judge. I've learned a lot, so thank you. We wish you both well. I know you're coming down the pike here with Election Day around the corner, and I want to thank everybody else who has joined us here today. And we hope that this was illuminating for you, and that you go out there and vote. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene, for all that you guys do.
Bye.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.